Hello again, book lovers. And a couple of days ago I finished reading The Swerve by Greenblatt, an author not known to me until now, Professor of Humanities at Harvard University and a Shakespeare expert. Now, The Swerve, having read it, I can't tell you exactly what it is. It could be the swerve that people take in order to keep justifying beliefs they already have, or the swerve of history, or the particular swerve that happened on the discovery of a long-lost poem by Lucretius, which is what this is about, almost Dan Brown-like in its storytelling. The scholar in search of the knowledge, in this case, one Poggio Bracciolini, who worked in the Curia for the Pope, and we're going to find out all about those, differing only from Dan Brown in the polar opposite truth values of the sentences it contains. It's a scholarly work. As you might expect, everything's backed up, lots of bibliography, but basically it's a weaving and wending tale. So the spine of it is the discovery of the long-lost work by Lucretius, known to us in English as On the Nature of Things. So we begin with Poggio making his way to a monastery, and we get a nice little biography of him. We are in 15th century Florence here, so it's peopled with a lot of historical characters, most of them not known to us non-historians. But one of the strengths of the book is to realise, as I often do now that I like to comb back into history, that it's not just us that combs back into history. These guys had the suspicion that some 1,000 years ago, at the flourishing height of the Roman Empire, at least in terms of literacy, that an age had been lost, a golden age. Ironically, similarly to the way a lot of people might look on Florence in the 15th century now. What marvellous works it spawned. Poggio and his mates were quite convinced that, although wary of the religious restrictions of the time and their own beliefs, that this was an absolutely marvellous poem that described a lot of the feelings that were coming to being just about now. The questioning mind, the world being made of atoms, that kind of thing. We learn about the extraordinarily lucky survival of this book. Chapter 4, The Teeth of Time, tells us about things that could happen to manuscripts and copies: woodworm, fire, neglect, mildew. And we, of necessity, get a lot of background of the papal rivalries and disputes of the time. Bad guy John the 23rd forms a lot of the background to the story, as do his immediate successors, and the fight to choose one pope out of three. Yes, it was that time, everybody, when finally a single pope had to be chosen out of the politically unaligned candidates. All this is history that I kind of know, but this is one of those books that takes you into it and gives you glimpses into the customs and the beliefs of the time. Oh, we get Lucretius' biography as well, so we've got around about the year 1 AD, you might say, perhaps from a little before to a little after. And then, of course, we are catapulted those 1,000 years into the future. In fact, it's more like 1,500 years, and the papal machinations that were going on, and also a little bit of the afterlife of this poem. Who did it influence? The philosopher Montaigne, for one, along with many people interested in the style and the history that had recently been unearthed. There's also, to my great joy, a philosophical edge to it, where we analyse the philosophy that's actually presented in the poem and see why it might have clashed with church beliefs of the time. Chapter 8 gives us a nice summary of what it might contain, which I'm going to read for you. So get ready. This is what was in the poem that caused such a ruckus and possibly a swerve in history. 1. Everything is made of invisible particles. These elementary particles are eternal. They don't decay, they just bump about and form into different things. They are infinite in number, but limited in shape and size, and they are always in motion in an infinite void. Although in Lucretius' poem, there's very positive. All this is very positive stuff. No reason to get upset. But then we get the universe has no creator or designer. This idea that if they exist, these gods are really not bothered about us. And everything happens as the result of, and here's the word again, a swerve. If the particles didn't bump into each other, they just followed straight lines. They might be parallel forever, but no, something sets the ball in motion. And in fact, it's this accidental clacking together which is the source of human free will. An old creation myth of the Romans is rehearsed again here, where it's suggested that the atoms all formed together in sort of monstrous forms that just didn't work, that couldn't breathe or see or whatever it was, until eventually, by sheer chance, over the almost infinite combinations of atoms, you get sparrows and humans and rhinoceroses and rivers and fields. But that, we underline with the next point, only shows us that humans are not unique. The world was not created for us or with us in mind. We simply bumble along like the atoms we're made of. Nor was there ever a golden age of tranquility and plenty. This is what Lucretius is saying, of course. But everything was just people trying to hack each other to pieces, rather like Hobbes's later conception of early society. All these atoms, of course, mean that the soul doesn't exist. There's just another coincidence of atoms. So when we go, the soul goes. And consequently, there's no heaven and there's no hell. And of course, you might think, oh, heavens, no, that can't be. But this is the positive message. Just why bother making sacrifices in this life for a future life? Why fear death, in fact? It can't be either pleasant or unpleasant. It's just, you're not there. So why not just take it that you're here for as long as you're here? You should have as good a time as you can, which doesn't mean gay abandon, of course. You need to have good social relations. You need to know when to say where the limits of things are. And that should enable you all to have a happy life. Religions, consequently, are rather cruel things that try to stop you having a good time, try to make you frightened of the future. Penultimately, and linking the two ideas together, the greatest obstacle to pleasure is not pain, it is delusion. That's an interesting one, isn't it, for the modern day? As Borges observed, a book is rather like Heraclitus River. He says you can't step in the same river twice. Well, you can't really read the same book twice because time has moved on. So we dip into Lucretius now and we see it's almost a fable for our times. Lastly, fear not. And this is a point that Darren Brown makes in his book called Happy, which is basically about his stoicism, also drawing on the philosophies of great earlier Stoics, be they Epictetus, the lame slave, possibly blind, or Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the world and yet wise and not driven by temptation. The part of that philosophy that makes up for the lack of God and God's interest in us is that when you understand the nature of things, that's the title, don't forget, this is what causes human wonder. To just ask, how did that green leaf come into being? What is the sun doing up there? What would it be like without it? Once we find the godless truth of what the world is and nature of the universe shouldn't bring us a sense of cold emptiness, like there's something missing. The idea is that once you are no longer a slave to the illusion, then you're not disillusioned, you're kind of had your eyes opened. And it's not a bad way to go through life. Thomas More, Pierre Gassendi, Jesus Christ, John Dryden, Poggio's close friends, they all crop up. This was a book that, though it's 260 pages of text, I skipped through it, as I say, rather like a novel, a very entertaining traipse through several historical time zones with nice little observations along the way.